Good afternoon. I thought I would also take from Denny the moving target approach. Joel Bashevkin, I'm with the Taproot Foundation. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you. And special thanks to Andras, who I've known for a year since he came to our Global Pro Bono Summit in San Francisco, and it's been a great discovery and conversation since. So I'm really pleased to be here. I prepared about 3 hours of material, but Denny promised if I touch my finger here, you get it all immediately in Hungarian. Done? We're good? Okay. In case it didn't come through, I'll do a few minutes more of other material. Today I want to talk to you about the start of what Taproot found when we got started 15 years ago. I think what we've been able to do since then is very reminiscent of some of the efforts that you have here today. I'm not going to make any big assumptions that I truly understand the large social issues that you face in your community. Just know that in the United States we have a huge number of social issues that we face on an ongoing basis and sometimes succeed and often fail to fully address. That we have a thriving corporate sector in the United States that has been learning how to embrace their employees' passions and energies, their own CSR strategies, and being really creative in ways to make a difference. So I want to spend a little time sort of walking back to our early days and bringing you through where we've been and share with you the best practices that we've learned along the way. I'll be honest, most of these were painfully learned. Many of them came to be from solving for problems we discovered. And I also want to share with you the path that we're on. You've heard Chris mention the BMW Foundation. We've been very busy working at a global level as well, and I want to share a little bit with you about pro bono from a global context. So when we got started, we posed what we thought was an innocent but actually really profound question. What if public benefit organizations actually had access to the kinds of resources, talent, funds, and solutions to be able to thrive as an organization and also to be able to get closer to their missions? And we were told that that's not possible. Jenny's data point that says that typical nonprofits in the United States only have about 8% to pay for things like rent and heat, never mind talent development, compared to corporations that have a full fifth of their funds flow back into the core operations. So since we knew we weren't going to remake the economic model for nonprofits, which is a fairly broken system in the United States, what if we channeled amazing talent and resources in that manner to be able to make and right-size nonprofits so that they had access to the same expertise, the same skill sets that were typically unaffordable? And we founded Taproot in order to prove that high-quality pro bono could be accomplished at scale in our society to support the well over 2 million nonprofits in our country. And at the same time, drive real value for the organizations so that the nonprofits were the most active players in this, that they were driving the conversation, not passively responding to the interests and motivations of the community members. With well over 50 to 60 million Americans volunteering, you can imagine that there's amazing goodwill. But what if the nonprofit recipients were actually more directive and more clear and more ambitious about what they could accomplish if they had access to amazing talent to help them drive their work? So we set out on a path of creating a model that could prove the viability of this. So let me just tell you a quick story from just about a year and a half ago. What you found today so far is that the conversation about pro bono is is like a dating service in some ways. It's finding the right party to work with another and to meet as equals, to be able to work together on a common direction to get to a shared destination together. And let me share with you two stories of a nonprofit in the United States and a corporation that Taproot consults with. The nonprofit is called the Children's Creativity Museum. And they've worked with youth, school-age youth, to bring creativity and that kind of energy to their education, because our American public education system does not afford for this kind of education, this kind of engagement and learning, where the synapses of your brain are actually firing in new ways than you would have had if you were simply sitting in a classroom. And they thrived. But then they had economic challenges, because you can only bring so many families and children through this organization. And so they set out to build a program that was curricular-based to be able to bring 2 to 5-year-olds into their space, because they saw that learning was starting much earlier in this way. So they didn't have any exhibit any kind of interactive, robust exhibit for them. And that was at the time that we were working with a Silicon Valley corporation called Adobe. Adobe's business purpose is to develop and to market creativity software. Many of you probably open a PDF hundreds of times a day. Well, that's Adobe. They, from a CSR, from a corporate social responsibility perspective, they sought to change the profile of what Americans could do creatively. Because so often in the creative field, you can't get a real job. It's really difficult to be employed if you're a truly creative person. So they wanted the youth of our society to have, in the United States, to actually have an opportunity to become creative themselves and to use Adobe employees to help with that. And the next part of this story is that we have a business leader who runs the largest business unit at Adobe, who had an incredible workforce. It's the innovation tank group that comes up with all the new software. Can you imagine creativity within the creativity engine of Adobe? And he was losing employees left and right, because he'd hired these amazingly skilled individuals, and he'd put them and sit them down, and they would do bug fixes. They would correct technical problems. And they would end the cycle, they'd release the software, and everyone would quit. So what do? We created pro bono engagements that kick in at that moment, that got them really creative themselves and energized. So they created an interactive exhibit space, and you should have seen these software engineers playing around in the Adobe labs, just jumping around like kids, because that's part of the experience, is interacting like children. And they brought this to life, and they really saw the impact they were having directly in the community and for themselves. Retention has never been higher. So I just want to share a little bit of that human element. I will be jumping around back and forth between ecosystem level conversations, marketplace, and some very specific, I'm hoping, useful tools that you can take for your one-on-one interactions of being a recipient, potential recipient of pro bono, client, and being a provider. So thank you, Jenny, for making this slide a little easier for me to share, but repetition is always helpful. One of our first corporate clients was The Gap. It's a clothing firm. And they are really focused on youth development, mostly around empowerment of underprivileged youth. And they said to us, well, put this in a context for us. We want to create, I don't know if anyone's heard the phrase, creating shared value. which is a deeper way of looking at CSR, corporate social responsibility, from a company's perspective, and give us a way that we can look at all the myriad of ways that we can drive impact in a highly coordinated, focused way for these adopted organizations. They developed really robust relationships, and they wanted all in. They wanted to give product, they wanted to give money, they wanted to give employees, and they wanted to understand where, in 2008 for Taproot, where does pro bono actually fit into that? So I won't repeat because Jenny did such a great job laying this out, but just to please appreciate that if you are a nonprofit, that the top bar means everything to you. And you need to be really selective of where you are spending your time, which is incredibly dear to you. It's very limited. So you have to make sure you're getting the most out of every interaction. And if you have one relationship with a gap that can cover all this, you don't have to manage all these relationships. You have a deep and lasting multi-point relationship. And that's what the Gap was looking for, and they were finding partners who could step up and own that comprehensive relationship with them. And it was deep, and it's been lasting. And if you're a company, amazing resources that you can bring to bear if you could only do it in a highly coordinated way. The fact is, there's not a lot of coordination in corporate America, and it's still very nascent. But for those who are able to step back, and in the United States there's actually quite a field, a CSR consulting field that is helping corporations be very focused, be very impact-oriented, and finding the kinds of partners who can really make a difference. And from Taproot's perspective, the further you get out, the most valuable every moment of engagement will be. So if your hands-on volunteering isn't getting you where you need to be, we have one executive director who told me, if I get another volunteer, I'm going to need to shut down. Because managing volunteers that don't actually move your organization forward is moving you backwards. So how do you invest extra time in high-quality consulting and services and be very judicious, very careful about what kinds of other volunteering you take in? So I have a perspective. I've been doing this work for a number of years now. And the vast majority of the 50 to 60 million Americans who are volunteering are doing hands-on kind of work. I want to make a case that every hour spent doing your highest giving, your highest skill, is going to be that much more valuable. So story is, we have a beer company called Boston Beer, Samuel Adams Beer. And the head of it brought his executive team to a local community center in Boston. And they painted a wall, because in nonprofits in America, walls always need painting, even if they're freshly painted. Because that's the way you get companies to show up. And they did the work, and the CEO got up in front of everyone at the end and said, you know, I apologize to you all. Our team did approximately a $600 paint job really badly. And we destroyed about $10,000 worth of executive skill that we could have brought during this time to your organization. And I'll never do that again. So he took a stand and said that he will go for the highest value of every moment spent being invested in the community and not spending it the other way. So I haven't told you about Taproot yet. Our mission is to lead, mobilize, and engage professionals by driving social change. And I would say our vision when we started out was to help every professional, nonprofit or business, to be able to participate in pro bono in the most highly effective way. For a business professional, really looking at the arc, the professional arc of their career, it's an amazing accomplishment to become a professional in our society, and I'm assuming your society as well. And to be able to give that back is at its highest form of giving. So when we want to achieve a future where every professional has this baked into their career, akin to the way the legal profession has baked it into every aspect of their work, that's what we're seeking to accomplish with any career, any profession. And it's not just holding lawyers up who have done tremendously well in this regard, but saying that everyone could be doing this, coming through their training and through into retirement and be part of their life cycle. And for every NGO, every nonprofit, to be able to bake in receiving pro bono consulting as a core part of mission accomplishment, as a core part of operating goals, and taking on the things that you rarely have if you're a nonprofit, the extra cash to pay for the paid consulting. So being able to manage this, and it's usually coming out of the extra money, because in the United States, most money that comes in is grant dollars that are focused on program, and the most precious is the general operating funds. That's usually what pays for the consulting, to build a new website, to get the training for the executives, to be able to do the marketing campaigns, to be able to do the strategy, the financial models, the business models, all of those things that we've heard about today, being the means, the tools that have been delivered, are often incredibly expensive, or the NGOs we work with who actually pay cut themselves short because they're basically taking bad consulting paid in lieu of extensive good consulting free. So the way we approach our work is we deliver services to nonprofits. We're actually the largest nonprofit consulting firm in the United States. We have a paid staff of about 45 people, but we have a volunteer workforce right now of 8,000. We work with about 4,000 plus nonprofits per year, and we route services to them from deep, long, extensive half-year, 500 consulting hour engagements, down through pro bono that's delivered in a month. We do done-in-a-day work because, again, many companies need the scope to fit within a day of engagement, and we found a sweet spot of how to create tight, clear scopes of work so that you can actually get all that done. In fact, one of our done-in-a-days is helping to diagnose, and I think what's interesting is the form of pro bono has expanded from being, can you deliver this to me, to being, can you be my executive coach for an hour a week? Can you help me diagnose my problem so that I can even go get the right assistance to help me with my problem? In fact, the deliverable is a work plan. It's not the actual result, as well as the myriad of other ways that pro bono can and should be delivered. And we also, as I mentioned with the Adobe example, we consult to currently about 50 corporations, where we help bring them through their own CSR strategy and determine what is the business drivers for them, and I'll go into this in a little bit, that helps them accomplish their own business goals, but are able to scale the areas of expertise that their employees have against the issues and causes that their nonprofits have. And we've been also doing a lot of field building, whether it's the Global Pro Bono Summit that starting tomorrow we'll have our 3rd annual in Berlin, whether it's Pro Bono Week, which is a global week annually where pro bono, both legal and all the other ways, are highlighted, so it's a marketing opportunity. So for us, our model that our complex small organization does is we do pro bono, we enable others to help them be their own best clients and providers of pro bono, and then inspiring that ethic. Because for us, in the United States, we could not get to the place we are today without having that 3-leg to our organizational stool. It would have fallen apart if we only were a provider, because we'd just be a point of one organization as large as we've become. We do extensive analysis of what the needs are in the nonprofit sector. Thankfully, the research is delivered to us by the top research firms pro bono. This is from our work we did with FTI Consulting. And this was in 2011. If we were to take this survey back when we were started, the percentage of nonprofits that were accessing pro bono would be really close to nil. So we've seen, both through us and now well over 1,000 other providers of pro bono throughout the United States, that we're getting to a better place. We're getting to a place where more nonprofits, again, marketing, that's the cornerstone of any kind of fundraising effort. of being able to contact and reach your clients and be able to tell them the story about what you're trying to accomplish and what you can uniquely accomplish. And it's amazing because you can bridge in the expertise that comes from a marketing field. And you can meld that. So it's a very easy, very accessible, high priority area. Doing executive and HR work is really important. Organizational development, incredibly important in the United States. The economy is shifting so dramatically that nonprofits need to readjust and recalibrate how they staff, how they train their people, how they onboard their staff in order to keep up to speed with this very volatile world that we're functioning in. Finance and IT, I mean, we know that if we can't project where we are financially, we're in serious difficulties. But at the same time, when you look at technology, that keeps changing on us. So there's new services, new products, new ways for us to be potentially more efficient and to have the technology support our work that much better. And I know that there is product donation. Microsoft is I think the world's largest donor of software in the world, and Chris may mention this in his comments, but they've become one of our clients. They want to take that product and add pro bono to help the myriad of NGOs around the world who get this free donation and can't actually harness its capabilities. It sits there, figuratively on the shelf. So there's a myriad of ways to make this touch point. And I'll spend the rest of my time breaking down how to get there. But we found that 97% of every nonprofit we asked, the thousands in the United States that we asked, 97% said they're still not getting the pro bono they need. They're not getting enough. It's not coming to them in the right form or fashion. So our job is very clear. It's to make this work clearly for everybody. Jenny also talked a bit about some of the employee value. I'll just tell you a quick story about HP, one of our first clients. We have one of our volunteers is actually an HP graphic designer. And she came to us and said, I love my job. I want to stay with HP. But if I have to keep designing in blue and white, nonstop, I'm going to go crazy and I'll have to leave my job. So that's my little vignette about HP. We understand, and I want to reference this from the NGOs in the room as well as the businesses. You have to understand the corporate environment that will allow you to access the relationship that you want to develop long term. And it takes a long time to develop those kinds of relationships. So being able to understand, if you're within a company, what are the business drivers and social impact goals, at the same time as understanding what expertise as an NGO you're trying to get, but you have to, that's only one piece. How do you actually make sure that you are solving for the business's goals? And it takes ability to step back. So we wrote a report a few years ago, actually with our an intern who had since gone off and started a pro bono program in Paris on the business value proposition. And it really comes down to, and again, I'll save your time because Jenny definitely covered some of these, that it's about increasing community impact. Let's say you're a corporate foundation and you have X dollars and they just slipped. You don't have quite as many dollars as you used to have, but you still want to maintain those commitments. How do you add value and expertise? Well, as I mentioned, thank you, Jenny, for letting me weigh in about the value that we developed, the valuation, hourly valuation for CCP. Suddenly you reach sort of a new commitment level so that a nonprofit could receive, let's say, $10,000 of cash and about $50,000 additional in pro bono consulting because it's valued at $120 an hour US. Suddenly you make the case that you have a robust relationship between this nonprofit and that company. And you can speak about the ultimate impact you're trying to get to together with that money and with that talent. From HR and talent development, you've also got amazing opportunities to recruit, retain, develop your employees, and that you want that learning experience to help both people, both the beneficiary and the provider. Innovation, and I'll give you a quick example. Well, who should I give? Oh, HP again. You know that their ink, they don't make their money off their printers. They make their money, it's a secret here, I'm sharing with you, that they make their money off the ink. It's probably the most expensive liquid commodity that exists. Well, they actually have a police force, as it were, that goes out looking and shutting down contraband, you know, the counterfeit ink. They sent their team to Africa to uncover and solve counterfeit medicines. There were fake medicines being distributed in Africa that were not the right medicine. And while they were there, they were able to create an indexing inventory system that allowed those organizations to be able to check immediately and to make sure it's the real medicine, not the fake medicine. They came back to California and filed, I think it was 13 new patents for their own, you know, ink processes. And I think I would say from our client list, I've got maybe half a dozen other examples of how, like, eBay went to explore expanding its services into a new area in Southeast Asia, and they did with us a pro bono project to see what mobile banking could do in a certain country. They actually came back and decided they weren't ready to move into that market yet, but they were able to help solve an incredibly important mobile banking issue there. And then reputation, well, in the United States, I talk about banks. Because with the 2008 downturn, banks were vilified. They were the cause of our meltdown. And one of the things that they did, both through governmental policy, but also on their own, was to step up and really invest in bringing their employees out. They wanted their employees to be proud of their work, proud of their employer, and that was a difficult time for them. So I'll give you a quick example of Citibank that brought together its Women's Affinity Network to do pro bono projects with women economic development organizations on International Women's Day. Couldn't be more exact, more specific, more thematic. And these are some of the ways that companies are really stepping up, and their NGO partners are able to tell that shared story. Because we know that NGOs are the most trusted voices in the world. The Edelman Trust Index Barometer keeps telling us that if you want to trust a story, go to the nonprofit. And if the nonprofit's going to say this company is doing right, that helps that company. So keep that in mind. I will say that one other point I want to share with the slide is most employees at companies want to do pro bono. Most executives at companies want pro bono to happen. The middle manager is the gatekeeper. They're the ones who have to perform on the revenue. So we've developed flashcards to give to the employees so that they can actually pitch, for all the reasons we've heard today, about why this is, for me to be a pro bono consultant, why this is such a great value to me and to our company. And we've basically fed them a pitch doc, a document that helps them articulate to their boss why this is worth their while to sacrifice a bit of their revenue generating bandwidth for this non-revenue generating bandwidth. And it's met with really interesting results, because often there's a leapfrog that goes up to the exec, oh, by the way, we really want to make this work out. So our website is complete with a myriad of these resources. The document that's listed here is available, as well as those flashcards just to walk into the boss's office is ready. We're somewhat subversive, Taproot is, in some of our strategies. We try to provoke a little bit. We think it's our responsibility. Okay, so it's great. Why are there problems? Well, the vast majority of nonprofits don't know where to find it, don't know how to set the scope of the work, and don't know how to manage it, don't have the time to manage it. So from our perspective, it's our job as Taproot, as an intermediary, to create the tools, to create the environment so that that doesn't have to be the problem. So the biggest piece is alignment. You're talking about professionals from different fields that may not really know each other or even use the same language. How do you create a definitive project scope that you can both manage to, that actually solves the real challenge of the organization? People who work in the consulting field understand that there's often what's called the presenting problem. Oh, I need a new website because I need money to come in. But really, once you start digging into it, you find that underneath it is the much more important underlying problem, which is the key messages, what we call the unique, compelling position of why this NGO matters and why it needs this audience's support has not been spent time on. So all the fancy click-throughs of websites is not going to solve the core messaging of that nonprofit to reach the audience, to make a compelling argument about why the mission of this organization is so incredibly important. So we spend a lot of time focusing on the scope ahead of time. We actually have a whole repository of pre-scoped templates, ways that nonprofits can quickly grab a scope of work from our website and then bring it and sell it to a company and say, this is what I need done. And it's about being a strong, clear client when you're talking to a provider. Securing. This is very difficult. We talked about networks. We've been consulting to LinkedIn for about 2.5 years now to help that social network find each other. How many people are active on, or how many people have a LinkedIn profile in the room? Okay. You now have a way to both search for or announce that you want to be approached or see someone who says, I want to do pro bono or I want to join a board. It's now at 4 million members have checked that box. It's increasing 200,000 a week. We're trying to make it easy for NGO leaders to look through their network to find who's at KPMG that I know, that I can get an introduction to that's one party away, and begin a conversation and explore if there's a possibility of working together, to pose that there's some way to advance the work so you can make the connection between the two. And then manage there's a myriad of tools developed by consulting firms, and Taproot is a consulting firm technically, to be able to make the management of that scope of work through the efforts. And I just want to touch on a couple of the ways that we help to support this. So we've got matching training tools. For the nonprofit, it's available on Amazon, is powered by Pro Bono. It's a step-by-step guide. It's a workbook for the nonprofit of how to be the best possible client of Pro Bono, whether it's from individuals or from companies. How to scope, secure, manage, and potentially scale your services that you're gathering through Pro Bono. And we did a mirror for the companies. What are the key questions that companies should be asking themselves through all the clients we've had working with corporations? What can we help them with to be able to work this out? So let me give you some of the best principles. I said the painful ones that we came up with. We actually, for each one of these, I won't go into them. There's a what happens when you don't do this, how you could go down the bad road, and what can be accomplished when you do it. I'm going to be positive today. So again, clearly defining projects, problems that meet real needs. That's coming up with a clear scope. From that, you want to be selective. I would say that the vast majority, or some of the big problems that we find, is that it's a mismatch. The interested, willing volunteer who wants to work with the employee who doesn't have the time to work on that project. Sure sign for a disaster. So the NGO has to be directive and selective, and at the same time, the professional has to be self-aware of what they're skilled at, competent at. Out of Taproot's 8,000 volunteers, the average years of skill in the specific area that we're having them do projects on, 12 years. We don't take people who are fresh out of school. We take people who are really seasoned and can take that and translate it into an entirely new field. There's something called pro bono time. Remember, it's not your day job. It's what you as the NGO are doing off hours in some cases. You have to be, again, very judicious about how you can allocate time to work on this as a client. And then for the provider, it has to fit with other work. So we actually recommend a signed document that has time limits and deadlines. In fact, throughout the world, there's a field called project management. In the United States, there's an association called Project Management Institute. Globally, it's called IPMA. And if you get one of those people onto a project, they will run this. They will make sure everyone is working to the calendar. I've had plenty of people who've really put me in my place. And as I look at the clock, I realize I probably should have had somebody keeping me in check on my timing. The other one is act like this is a paid engagement. In America, it's always been considered it's voluntarism. But again, if you aren't, as the NGO, an active client about this, you're not going to give it the attention it deserves. The volunteer, the pro bono consultant, is not going to feel that they're actually doing something that really is going to ultimately make a difference. And they have other priorities. So it's how to keep focused in that area. And then, because so much of the work we have seen has just sat there on the shelf after all the good work, and it wasn't implemented, and it wasn't trained and introduced in a way, implemented in a way that could be sustained by the team that is at the nonprofit, we always try to make sure our scopes of work go all the way through implementation, because the last thing you want is to hand over a presentation or a material and it doesn't become immediately part of the operations of the organization. And then the last is that, let's be clear that there's a certain power dynamic that exists between companies and NGOs, but treating this as equals and acknowledging that learning can go both ways is a very empowering way to know that incredibly passionate, creative leaders in the nonprofit sector who are very driven to address critical societal issues are giving an opportunity to a business professional who has a day job and they have that work to do, and you're basically feeding their passion. You're giving them a chance to translate what they do technically on a daily basis for something that can really matter. So flip it around a little bit and play with that. And we've broken a number of rules around voluntarism, and we've been surprised with how valuable it's been. So matching. We've talked before, there's a certain amount of employee skills, there's a certain amount of nonprofit need. It's really that sweet spot that we focus on. There's a lot of need that cannot be met by business people. There's a lot of opportunity that still needs to be driven elsewhere. But the work of Taproot, the work of OK, and many others in the world is to take that circle and get them as close to overlapping as possible, to make as many successful matches as possible. So that for us, in fact, in the United States and where I've been around the world, it's been predominantly a demand-driven marketplace. So we've got the supply of pro bono services, you've got the demand from the nonprofits. More professionals, 4 million on LinkedIn, want to offer these skills. Not enough compelling asks are out there. So we spend the majority of our time moderating professional donation of skills and building up, making as accessible as possible the expertise to the project so that that could be benefiting. And so for us, organizations like Taproot, OK, it's to educate, motivate, prepare, and to develop the kind of systems to make it easier and more, allow more independent engagement between professional and NGO. I'll just show you quickly that we're always doing reports. For people in the corporate field, we just came out with this with PwC support. What we found is that globally, corporate pro bono programs, this is a CEO report, a global CEO report, has been on a good increase, and we see that trend continuing. And again, this is a global data set, not a US data set. And that there are a couple of, and I think I mentioned them already, that are key trends that we've seen around talent development, working with GSK, mentioned earlier. We are now part of, Pro Bono is part of the emerging talent learning cycle. So instead of doing a fake project as part of that MBA development program, they're actually working with organizations in the community, and they couldn't be prouder of their employer. And they're actually doing the work of this. I'll also leave you with a little bit of information that's unique. The Committee Encouraging Corporate Philanthropy did a Giving Around the World survey, Giving Around the Globe, and it's interesting to call it out region by region. In fact, Asia is far ahead in pro bono compared to greater Europe. There's a lot of opportunity here. What's been interesting is a lot of matching dollars, 74% in Europe have, companies have matching gift programs for their employees, really powerful. There's a strong international effort, so from Europe to other regions, even more than other parts of the world. But given what we see with the millennial, the influx of descriptively millennial employees who are seeking to do more good in partnership with their employers, that's a real opportunity that you are now at the cusp of embracing. It's something that the United States has been engaging in for the past 6 to 8 years. And I also want to mention, I believe Marcus is coming soon, but we've had a tremendous partnership with the BMW Foundation for over 3 years. We have been working with many multinational corporations, and we have been a training ground for many of the Taproot-like pro bono organizations around the world. And we were able to formalize this just at the same time that the BMW Foundation was convinced that pro bono should be one of their core program areas, that the way to advance improving our globe and our societies that we're all in is by harnessing the expertise in partnership with each other. And so we've been really focused on bringing our work globally. It allows me to come here with you and to maintain a really robust relationship with OKA. And I'll leave you with our tagline, which is, I'll explain it. If you're going to participate in the community, you should make it matter. It should be really meaningful and valuable. And we find that that is the piece that really helps us stay focused on what matters. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joel, and don't leave us just yet, because we have a few minutes for questions from the audience. És ismét felhívom a figyelmet a mikrofonra, ami mozog körbe, de fontos a szinkrontolmácsolás miatt, úgyhogy aki kérdezni szeretne, tegye fel a kezét, kap egy mikrofont, és utána kérdezhet, és amíg a kérdések megszületnek a fejekben, és a mikrofon odaér, addig kérdezek én. So I'm just going to ask a question while people make up their minds about theirs.
English, Hungarian.
Which do you prefer?
English.
Okay. I was wondering, as you were describing pro bono projects and how it works for companies in the States, one gets the impression that it's almost expected. Or maybe even the use of almost is not necessary. It is expected of a company, and especially a major corporation, to have a pro bono program and to have a volunteer program. Yeah. Does it ever happen? Is it ever a problem that people are put under pressure? That although they are already giving 12, 13, 14-hour work days to their company, then there's also the expectation over and above that they should engage in a pro bono program, and therefore the whole joy of it might get lost.
No, that's a very interesting point, and I think it might be different for the American society than maybe what you have here. It's strictly a volunteer opportunity. The opportunities are presented by the employers. It's up to the employee to make the decision if they are motivated.
Oh, I understand that, but the point I was making, that I think it's also an expectation in many cases. And people have made the point before today that it can help career advancement as well. I'm sure that's something that people are thinking about when they make their personal decisions on whether they want to volunteer.
Let me ask Jenny to...
Yes, Jenny obviously has something to say.
Tag team, right? So clearly the trend is that 50% of companies in that CECP study have pro bono programs at their company. So the trend is towards pro bono. Most companies that make pro bono part of the institution also provide a way for employees to do that on company time or with company permission to leave their job. Some companies often treat it like a regular commercial gig, and they give a business code to it, just like you'd give a business client code to any of your other work, and treat it like a paid client as part of the business. So the trend is to make it part of the work experience, that you're giving something back to the community. And, you know, I think the voluntold, we talk about voluntold and volunteering. So it is a fine line. And I think companies are very aware that the joy and the passion needs to stay a part of the mix, and to not drive it into the workday in such a way that it ceases to be exciting.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. That was actually the point I was trying to get to, that
Wonderful.
Companies probably, especially here where this is something relatively new, need to think about that people will only enjoy this as long as it's something that still makes their lives.
We typically recommend coming up with a document that's an agreement so that the commitment can be made for the duration, and it's an attainable one. So thanks, Jenny.
És ott a kérdés.
Yes. So you mentioned the millennials, and I was wondering what they say about the millennials is that they're basically more jack of all trades than skilled professionals in a, you know, when they have a strict focus on one skill. But as it seems to me, pro bono is mostly, I mean, that's what you need, right? You need somebody who's really focused, who has a very specific skill in something. So, do you see my point?
Yeah, well, I see part of it. I think that the
So where is this going to go?
Right. Well, I think I don't take the jack of all trades approach. I think that there's, early in the career, a discovery process to find what is a compelling way to add value to their work. And the way the workplace is evolving, you need to be what we call a T-shaped professional, which is you have breadth across a lot of areas, and then you go deep in one skill area. And that may be the one that you're developing as part of your career path as a millennial. But what I think is to my point, and to the piece around volunteerism more important, is that the workforce is now looking for a much more complex, systematic, more holistic engagement with their company. So it isn't just being, you just give me what I do 9 to 5, it's what are we doing together? We talk about in the United States, this is the generation that grew up being born with recycling, because we never had recycling. It's a much more self-aware, and against prior assumptions, much more selfless in what they're trying to accomplish, given the enormity of the societal and environmental challenges that we all have.